that a man sets the tone of a relationship, the woman creates the atmosphere of it.
Women set a tone too, because we have our attitudes of how we want people to deal with us, how we want people to talk to us, the aura we put out and the energy that we put out. But I stopped responding to the negativity and the aggression and the arguments and the yelling. And when I stopped taking the bait, he had no other choice but to deal with me differently. Welcome to another episode of Becoming with Angelina Watkins, where we are turning dreamers into believers and doers. This is a podcast dedicated to helping you get out of your own way, overcome the hurdles of your past so that you can walk in purpose and live an abundant life. And I'm your host, Angelina Watkins, your queen of becoming, here to help you become who you need to be so that you can do what you're purposed to do, so you can live the life that you want to live. And me and my guests are here to give you a fresh perspective and the blueprint to win at love, life, and money. So in this episode, I have a lot to say, and I probably can't say it all in one sitting, but someone sent me a TikTok video, and I love it when y'all send me TikTok videos. And I try my best to do some commentary around it, but I can't get to all of them. But I did get to listen to this one. I said, I have to create an episode on this TikTok video that I received. And so it was titled Men Set the Tone. And you know me, before I comment, I have to know within what context is this video. I need to hear the beginning and I need to hear what came after it. And y'all, that was the mistake I made, because I went and I watched the full YouTube video, which was a session of Tackle the Text with Pastor Keion Henderson, the pastor of Lighthouse Church in Houston. And he had this series called Tackle the Text. And I want to say that this particular episode was about pursuit of happiness in relationships, or may have just been pursuit of happiness. Whatever it is, I'll have it down in the description for you all to go view the whole thing. But in this episode, him and the other pastors are dropping some gems. They have given me some things to really discuss. And so I'm going to start with the video that was given to me, but I'm surely going to go back and talk about some of the other gems that they discussed, not in this episode. So keep watching for other episodes as I continue to break down this Tackle the Text episode, where we're getting into relationships and the man versus the woman. And we're talking about, competition versus complementing. And we're talking about harshness and how the men are showing up and how they're speaking to us and how they're talking to us and how they're being in the marriage and in relationships. And if you want certain things, you're going to have to change your behavior. So we're going to get all into that. But let's go ahead and start out with the first clip. And I'm just going to kind of break it down here a little bit.
This is what I believe, and I say in my counseling, Pastor, that a man sets the tone of a relationship, the woman creates the atmosphere of it.
Love it.
So if a man goes in and he sets a tone, I had to set a new tone in my house, which now the tone that I'm setting, Kim creates the atmosphere for.
Now, men set the tone, women create the atmosphere. Now, when I first heard him say that, my thought was, men set the tone. Yeah, anybody can set a tone, right? Because tone is about your attitude, and it's about how you're showing up, and it's about the aura that you put out there as to how people can talk to you and treat you. And if your attitude is nasty, then you're going to get nastiness, because you get what you give out. The energy that you give out is the energy that you'll receive. So when we talk about setting a tone, and he's talking about the men being responsible for setting the tone, I think that we have to take this in the context of where he is when he's talking about marriage, being a spiritual leader, following after the spiritual principles of family and how the man is supposed to be the head of the household, right? And the women submit yourselves to the husband as he submits himself to Christ. And so as the man of the leader of the home and the head of the household, how are you showing up? What is the tone that you're setting? So that's within context, but let's be clear. Women set a tone too, because we have our attitudes of how we want people to deal with us, how we want people to talk to us, the aura we put out and the energy that we put out, and then it boomerangs and comes back to us. And so we can set a tone too. But what happens here is, in a marriage or relationship, someone has to decide to change their tone. Because just as well as he has a tone and he's waiting on her to change, she has a tone, she's waiting on him to change, and ain't nothing changing in this relationship because ain't neither one of them fixing their tone. So as the head of the household, he realized the change starts with me. I can't expect her to change. I can't expect her to do things that I want her to do if I'm not showing up the way I need to show up, if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. And so we've got to get out of expecting people to do things that we're not willing to do ourselves. We're expecting people to show up in a way that you're not even showing up for yourself. And so he got to the point where he had to realize, he came to the realization, he had some reflection and said, wait a minute. I have to do something different. He made a conscious decision to do something different, to show up differently. And what we have to know is that when you want change, you have to be the change you want to see. You have to make the change within you, and you start showing up differently. Because when you show up differently, everyone else in your life ain't got no choice but to show up differently, because they're not dealing with the same person anymore. See, they're waiting on that person who's usually going off, who's got a nasty attitude, who's disrespectful, who's rude, who's doing all kinds of things. And that's who they're waiting to deal with. But when you give them something different, when you give them a calmer person, a peaceful person, a person who's willing to talk it out without yelling and cussing, a person who's willing to sit down and talk amicably without the fighting and the violence, when you show up differently, and you decide that you're going to not be that person that they're used to, they don't have no choice but to change how they respond and react to you, because they're not dealing with the old you. They're dealing with the new you. I gave an example to someone that, there was a point in time in a past relationship where my ex was calling me all the time, yelling, leaving me nasty voice messages, and I just got to the point where I'm not responding to that. I'm not going to sit on this phone and argue with you. I'm not going to respond to your voicemails and argue with you, and I'm not going to certainly keep letting you talk to me the way you're talking to me. And so I began to show up differently. And when I stopped responding to the negativity and the aggression and the arguments and the yelling, and when I stopped taking the bait, he had no other choice but to deal with me differently. He had no other choice but to approach me differently. He had no other choice but to treat me differently, because now I'm demanding something different, because I have changed who I am, that says, that doesn't work for me. And then to this day, that same person who was nasty to me gives me the respect that I deserve, because I refuse to be that person that he wanted me to be, which was argumentative and aggressive and yelling and all that carrying on. So when you change, they don't have no choice but to change. All right.
I get home, it's peace in there. It's welcoming in there. It's warm in there. Sometimes I go in there, good pot of beans cooking, and because the atmosphere is right. But it didn't, I at first was expecting her to set the atmosphere so it can change my tone. But I'm the man in this relationship. So the man has to go in, set a new tone in his house, and watch that woman create an atmosphere. She can't even help herself. Wow. She created to create an atmosphere for you.
He changed his tone. He was waiting for her to change the atmosphere in her tone and the way she was showing up in order to feel like he can change who he is. But when he changed who he is, then she changed who she is, because now I'm dealing with a different man. I'm dealing with a different husband. I'm dealing with someone who's leading and guiding. I'm dealing with someone who's coming at me differently. And as she says, she ain't got no choice but to create the atmosphere. Men, when you do us right, when you show up the way you're supposed to, you talk to us the way you're supposed to, when you nurture us and you create that safe place for us, we are there willing and waiting to do what God has designed the woman to do and be. But when you don't want to let us in and you want to be nasty and you want to act a certain way and you have this tone, well, we're going to draw back. It's a two-way thing. We have a tone and you draw back. Y'all have a tone and we draw back. And as somewhere in this marriage, in this relationship, someone's got to heal. Okay? We got two broken people together and it ain't working, because if you go back and watch my last episode about compatibility, we are compatible in so many ways on paper. But in this communication, we can't even communicate right. Neither one of us want to change. Neither one of us is developing ourselves. Neither one of us is learning how to communicate in order to make the relationship work. Somebody has to show up differently. He chose to show up differently. And when he showed up differently, the woman responded differently. And she began to create that atmosphere. Because the reality is, in a marriage, if we follow the spiritual order of marriage, men are supposed to set the tone, because they're the leaders of the household. They're supposed to be able to lead and guide us. The problem is a lot of men are not in position. I talked about that in another episode. Men are not in position that they're supposed to be to lead the household. They're supposed to set the tone and the authority of what's happening, the tone of the marriage, the tone of the children and the family in the household. And when you're not doing that, guess what happens? The woman has to now step in and she sets the tone. And she's the one deciding how things are going to work out. And then when you're not getting what you're getting because you weren't giving what you were supposed to give. You're not getting those meals and you're not getting us cooking because we're like, I'm tired. I have to carry the load. I'm doing everything. I'm tired. I ain't doing all of that. Okay. But we also have to know that in the institution of marriage, things are changing, because it just can't keep being, the roles are different. And we have to be accepting of today as to what those roles look like. Women aren't just cooking and cleaning and having babies all the time. Okay, we do have careers and we are bringing home some money and we are contributing to the household. But in that, we still have to work together. Okay, we both have to have a tone and we both have to create an atmosphere. But in the spiritual order, the man sets the tone, the woman creates the atmosphere. But in order to get what you want to get, you have to change how you're showing up. Okay? So now, stay tuned. Next episode, we're going to continue with what's going on in this Tackle the Text session. Because when I tell you, they gave me some things to think about and talk about, I want to think, I want to talk, and I want to let it all out. All right? So, see you in the next episode. And meanwhile, where you are, it's not where you have to be. Your past does not define you. You define you. So heal, transform, and pursue you.